9 to 5, Monday to Friday, 8 hours a day, 40 hours a week. It's the rhythm your alarm clock keeps, the rhythm your commute follows, your school schedule, your weekend. And we all know where it came from. Workers fought for it, won it, and 8 hours became the standard because 8 hours is what's fair, what's healthy, what's right. Here's the thing, that's not quite what happened. The number 8 was never about your health. The man who made it the American standard explained exactly why he did it in print in 1926. He needed you to have time to go shopping. The story we learn goes like this, and a lot of it is true. In 1817, a Welsh mill owner and reformer named Robert Owen coined a slogan, 8 hours labor, 8 hours recreation, 8 hours rest. At the time, factory shifts of 12 to 16 hours were normal. Children worked them too. For the next century, the 8-hour day was the labor movement's flag. In May of 1886, hundreds of thousands of American workers walked out in a general strike for it. In Chicago, the protest ended with a bomb and a trial the world still argues about the Haymarket affair. People marched for that number. People died for it. And eventually, the story goes, the workers won. In 1938, the Fair Labor Standards Act made the standard federal law 44 hours, dropping to 40 by 1940, with overtime pay beyond that. A century of struggle, then victory. It's a good story, and the struggle was real. But there's a question this version never answers. Strikes had been happening for decades. Owners had resisted, violently, for decades. So why, in the 1920s, did some of the biggest industrialists in America suddenly stop fighting the short week and start advertising it? The answer wasn't in the streets. It was in a factory in Michigan. In 1913, Henry Ford had a problem money was supposed to solve and couldn't. His new assembly line had made production fast and work unbearable. The same motion, every few seconds, all day. Workers quit in waves. Ford's annual employee turnover ran around 370%. To keep 100 men working, he had to hire nearly 400 a year and train every one of them. So, in January of 1914, Ford did something the newspapers called madness. He roughly doubled the basic wage to $5 a day. It wasn't charity. It was arithmetic. Turnover collapsed, experienced workers stayed, the line sped up, and something else happened. Something Ford noticed carefully. His own workers started buying Model Ts. The men who built the cars became the market for the cars. There was fine print though, and it tells you what the money was really for. The $5 wasn't a wage, it was a wage plus a bonus, and the bonus came with conditions. Ford created a department for it, the sociological department. Its inspectors visited workers' homes to check that they were sober, clean, and saving money before they qualified. If the company was going to build consumers, it intended to inspect them too. That observation changed the rest of the story. In September of 1926, Ford cut the week in his plants from 6 days to 5 40 hours with no cut in pay. And then he gave an interview to World's Work magazine explaining why. It's still in print. The title alone says most of it. Why I favor 5 days work with 6 days pay. In it, Ford says these are his words that the people who consume the bulk of goods are the people who make them, and he calls that the secret of our prosperity. He explains that a workman would have little use for an automobile if he was in the factory from dawn to dark. He talks about the influence of leisure on consumption. The weekend, in Ford's telling, wasn't a concession to workers. It was a production decision. Free time was the factory where demand got built. Ask the question this channel always asks. Who benefited? Look at what the 5-day week did for the people who granted it. Workers with wages but no time are savers. Workers with wages and a free Saturday are customers for cars, fuel, radios, movie tickets, everything an industrial economy was learning to mass produce. Ford said it plainly in 1926. The 5-day week would pay. In his words, an industry that couldn't afford it wouldn't survive anyway. And one company the size of Ford changes the math for everyone. Once the largest manufacturer in the country proved short weeks were profitable, the short week stopped being a radical demand and became a business model. 12 years later, the Fair Labor Standards Act wrote it into law. The number the unions had bled for and the number that sold the most cars happened to be the same number, and that, historians argue, is exactly why it finally passed. To be fair to the record, Ford was no friend of organized labor. His company fought unions, sometimes brutally, into the late 1930s. The point is not that Ford was secretly generous. The point is that the 8-hour standard won when it aligned with profit, not before. Now notice what happened after. Nothing. In 1930, the economist John Maynard Keynes predicted that within 100 years, his grandchildren's generation would work about 15 hours a week. Productivity would rise so far that the rest would be unnecessary. He was right about productivity. American output per hour has multiplied roughly 5 times since 1948. The workweek? Still 40. Frozen since 1940. Economists still debate why rising consumption expectations, status competition, the simple fact that employers capture efficiency gains as profit rather than time, the evidence suggests a simpler summary. The week stopped shrinking when shrinking it stopped paying the people who set the schedule. Look at your own calendar. Rush hour exists because millions of people were synchronized to the same factory rhythm. School hours mirror office hours. Even your electricity is priced around the 9 to 5. A scheduling decision made in a Michigan auto plant in 1926 is still running your Tuesday. Even the parts of work that feel new follow the old blueprint. Remote work was supposed to break the 9 to 5. For most companies, it simply moved the same 40 hours onto a screen. The hours weren't questioned, only the location. And yet, the experiment has quietly restarted. In 2022, 61 British companies moved about 2,900 workers to a 4-day week, at full pay, for 6 months. When the trial ended, roughly 92% of the companies kept it. Revenue held, resignations dropped. That result shouldn't surprise anyone who has read Ford's interview. Fewer hours paying for themselves was his argument, almost word for word a century ago. Which leaves the uncomfortable version of the question. If the 40-hour week was adopted when it profited the people who set it, what happens to the 4-day week? It won't arrive when the studies say workers are healthier. It will arrive when someone does Ford's arithmetic again and decides it pays. None of this makes your weekend less real. It just means the week was never a law of nature. It was an equilibrium, the settlement between what workers demanded and what, at one moment in history, happened to sell more cars. 8 hours was the right number for 1926. Nobody has seriously asked what the right number is for now. This is Unwritten, and there's always more to the story.